So now let's switch gears a bit and create some new job requisitions. I'm going to create several new, specifically 10 new HR open new position requests. And once we've created those new process instances, we're going to submit 5 new position requests and 5 part-time position requests. At this point, I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to submit those 5 new full-time positions and 5 new part-time positions, and then as a general manager I'm going to reject the full-time requests and accept the part-time requests. And when I resume, we'll be in the optimizer perspective. Okay, so now that we've submitted those full-time and part-time requests, accepted the part-time requests and rejected the full-time requests, we have more activity that's traveled through this process. So when I hit the calculate button to recalculate the heat map view of the performance of this process, we'll see that the red highlights around submit job requisition and GM review new position change a bit. So let's go ahead and do that. We can see that GM review new position now has a heavier red highlight around it, indicating that we have more activity that has taken longer to process by the general manager. If we take a closer look at that, we can see that there's different wait time for each activity. If I switch the path to the path analysis heat map, we can see that the percentages have changed a bit. Of all of the 100% requests that have gone through the process, 94% have required general manager approval. 53% have been rejected. We can see a large number of requests have gone through the process, been rejected. 53% have been approved, and we've only ever submitted one request to backfill an existing position. So now let's use something called guided optimization. This is a capability of Western Lombardi Edition in the optimizer perspective that will identify some patterns of activity through the process for us. If we select the business data that we're most interested in this case general manager approval, then the guided optimization will attempt to spot some trends, some patterns of activity based on general manager approval. And indeed it does. It spots the fact that when the general manager is approving requests, there are patterns related to part-time and full-time requests. And if we continue through this guided optimization, it shows us that a certain percentage of the time when a full-time request is reviewed, the general manager rejects it 100% of the time. And when a part-time request reaches a general manager for approval, it's approved 100% of the time. So if we proceed with this guided optimization, we'll see what happens is it actually changes our process diagram. It essentially improves it, further optimizes it by adding a bypass rule set, a process rule decision table that we'll see in a moment, and an auto bypass gateway. So if a general manager is needed to manually review, it'll go down this path. But if we can predict with a high confidence level that it's going to be approved or rejected by the general manager, we can auto bypass and approve or reject it without involving manual intervention by the general manager. So this enhancement, those two elements, the bypass rule and the auto bypass gateway, have been added to our process diagram. If we take a closer look at that set of rules, we can see that it created a decision table for us. And in this decision table, when it evaluates to full-time, it's automatically rejected, and when it evaluates to part-time, it's automatically approved. Or I should say, we set the general manager approval to approved. So we need to make sure that these rules, or the results of these rules firing, are sent back to our process from this rule element. So we need to visit the data mapping and make sure that that status and GM approval that's sent into the business rule evaluation, the results of it, the GM approval that's auto set, and whether or not we should bypass the manual intervention of the general manager is sent back. So as long as we map those results back into the top level process, we should get the desired results. So let's go ahead and step through this and see if we've indeed changed the behavior of our process. Let's go ahead and submit a full-time request. Once that full-time request is submitted, it progresses to the new rule. The rule is fired. It's in a system lane. Because it was in a system lane, we saw momentarily that it was highlighted, but without any manual intervention, when we refreshed, it went ahead and progressed. It actually went down through the auto bypass gateway, went down this bypass path, and back up to the hiring manager, because in this case we submitted a full-time request that was automatically rejected. So let's go ahead and progress through this. Claim this activity again. We'll change this from a full-time to a part-time request. This time it should be automatically approved. When we refresh, we can see that it was automatically approved and the process is completed. Now let's send a new scenario through this process. Let's come in and make a new request, and now let's make this contract request. This is an employment status we haven't used before, so therefore the rule evaluation should indicate that we can't auto bypass and instead have to send it to a general manager for manual review. So let's go ahead and refresh, and we can see that indeed that's what happened. It went through the rule evaluation, the auto bypass gateway sent it to the general manager for manual review. Since we don't have any rules for that kind of an auto bypass condition, contract employee request is new to us. So let's go ahead and reject this as the general manager. That gets sent back up to the hiring manager on that backward branching rework path. And let's go ahead and set this now to part-time, and what we should see is that it's auto approved. And indeed it is. It visits the system lane briefly. If we get lucky when we're hitting the refresh, if we hit it quickly enough, then we might get a visual indication like this, that it's actually briefly visited the system lane to be executed by the system. And if we refresh again, we can see that the process has indeed completed. All the activities were visited and closed and completed. So now let's go back to the designer view, and we'll take a snapshot to version our success. We'll name this version 1.0 success and take a look at what we can do with these snapshots or versions. If we click on the first snapshot in the revision history, version 1.0 hands-on exercise was created for us before we began this exercise. So when we click on this, what we should see is what the process looked like when we started this hands-on exercise. So indeed it brings up the process as it looked at the beginning of our scenario, and not only can we look at this process, but we can actually run it. We can run any snapshot version immediately. So if we experiment with this, we can see that it works just like it did when we began working on the HR new position process. So these snapshots allow us to version our work, manage our change, and really immediately get access to the way that a process worked at a given point in time. If we go back to the designer view and we click on the last snapshot that we made, version 1.0 success, we can run that. Snapshots makes it very easy to manage your change. This completes this quick start tutorial scenario. Thank you for listening.